Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the first Remain in Mexico refugee is granted asylum, but his turmoil isn't over yet.
This is someone who the immigration judge has already determined is in danger. His life is in danger, and has also determined that Mexico is not a safe place for him to be.
Why the government might send him back to Mexico and where the case goes from here. Plus, President Trump visits the two latest cities terrorized by mass shootings, El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio. But his presence was met with organized protests. And San Diego County is demanding clean air for all. What's being done to get high-pollution vehicles off the road? KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. It's August 7th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Priya Sridhar. For the first time ever, an asylum seeker sent back to wait in Mexico under a new Trump administration policy won his asylum case. But now the U.S. government might try to keep him in Mexico, and that has his lawyers crying foul. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler has more on this developing situation.
The refugee, who goes by the first name Alec, was an evangelical church leader in Honduras, where he was targeted by MS-13 gang members for evangelizing young gang members. So says his lawyer, Robin Barnard, with Human Rights First. On Tuesday, Alec became the first asylum seeker nationwide in the migrant protection protocols to win their asylum case and gain legal status to be in the United States, explained Barnard.
He was among the first group that were sent back to Tijuana in January. He's been waiting there for 6 months for his day in court, and yesterday an immigration judge heard him testify for several hours and decided, based on his testimony as well as all the evidence we supplied to the court ahead of this hearing, that he met the definition of a refugee under United States law and that he qualified for asylum in the United States.
But right now, Alex sits in detention at the San Ysidro port of entry, as the government considers returning him to Mexico once again while it appeals the decision. This appeals process could take years.
Well, if someone's in detention, usually they will be released from detention. If they're not detained, they leave that court with that status, and they can go on with their lives. And that's what we've asked of the government in Alex's case as well, is just that he be allowed to be released from custody. We have a sponsor here in the community who's ready and willing to receive him. He's been found to be a refugee under our laws. DHS ran all of their necessary security checks before the hearing. There's no reason why he needs to be in detention right now.
Alex's lawyer, along with the immigrant rights group Alliance San Diego, as well as members of the local clergy, spoke in support of the refugee's speedy release on Wednesday afternoon in front of the federal courthouse. The Department of Homeland Security now has 30 days to decide whether it will appeal the ruling. During that time, it's unclear if an asylum seeker sent to Mexico under the Trump policy will be returned to Mexico again as he waits for an appeal to run its course. Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
President Trump paid a visit today to the two communities still mourning after the weekend's mass shootings. He went first to Dayton, Ohio, then El Paso, Texas. However, his trips were not well received by some residents. CNN reporter Whitney Wild shows us what happened.
President Trump is traveling to El Paso, Texas, a city grieving after this weekend's mass shooting.
We'll be meeting with first responders, law enforcement, some of the victims.
The president visited Dayton, Ohio this morning, meeting with local officials before making a stop at Miami Valley Hospital. There, he met with medical personnel and some of those affected by last weekend's mass shootings. Also on the ground in both cities, supporters and protesters of the president's visits.
There are things he can do. He doesn't have to wait for Congress. He has some steps he can take with some executive action. He could start to put funding towards research and development of safer guns.
And in El Paso, the mayor acknowledged the divide.
I realize that there's a lot of emotional pain and concern over his visit, but I'm the mayor of all of El Paso, and I feel like it's my duty, obligation, my fiduciary duty to meet with the President of the United States.
The president said Wednesday that he is open to talking about some aspects of gun control legislation.
I'm looking to do background checks. I think background checks are important. I don't want to put guns into the hands of mentally unstable people or people with rage or hate, sick people.
But it's unclear if Congress can reach a consensus. The House passed 2 gun control bills, but the Senate hasn't voted on either one.
El Paso, now victimized by racial hatred, is a city with a deep Mexican-American past. John Moan from the Associated Press takes a look at its history and push to pick up the pieces moving forward.
El Paso, Texas is a gateway to the United States and Mexico. Founded before the Declaration of Independence.
In many ways, all roads lead to El Paso.
A hometown grief-stricken after a gunman murdered at least 22 people on Sunday, both American and Mexican. A total nearly equaling those killed in the city last year.
Despite saying we're a big city, in top 20, we're a small town mentality. We all get together, we're friends, we know each other.
Authorities say racial hatred and political rhetoric motivated the suspect. A reported online screed written by the 21-year-old man said he'd target Latinos and immigrants.
I've never felt this kind of distress in my life.
Communications professor Richard Pineda says the shooter picked the border city for a reason.
There's no mistaking the fact that El Paso has been essentially under a microscope as immigration issues have come to the forefront. Also, folks haven't made the connection that the president kicked off his re-election campaign in El Paso.
The Trump administration has repeatedly zeroed in on El Paso, claiming the border city had a crime problem due to immigration. A claim proven false, and it's been one of the testing grounds of hardline Trump immigration policy. More than 700,000 people live here, coexist with their Mexican neighbor Juarez to the south. Both cities built on trade and immigration. El Paso is almost 80% Hispanic.
It's always been a Mexican city.
A Mexican-American cultural capital where the zoot suit became a fashion icon.
You know, the Pachuco is, pictured with the baggy pants and the watch chain, the zoot suiter. Well, El Paso, for us, we call it Chuco. We say, I live in Chuco.
A community of political activists, writers, poets, professionals, and merchants.
We would have shown him around the town. We would have shown him what a wonderful place this is, that he can walk out at night and not worry about being mugged.
At a growing makeshift memorial near the crime scene, El Pasoans lament and reflect.
I am Irish, Mexican. My last name is German, my stepdad. So it's very diverse, and that is the beauty of America.
For Daniel Chacon, diversity in immigration is why the city nicknamed El Chuco is a success.
Most of us are bilingual. Even white people here speak Spanish.
A binational city and a culture and history that span 2 countries for centuries. John Moan, Associated Press, El Paso, Texas.
Federal prosecutors and lawyers for Margaret Hunter are seeking a delay in her sentencing date. She's the wife of Duncan Hunter, the Republican congressman from Alpine. In 2018, the Hunters were charged with misusing more than $200,000 in campaign funds to pay for their lavish lifestyle and falsifying federal election campaign reports. He's maintained his innocence, but she pleaded guilty to a conspiracy charge and agreed to testify against her husband. The Navy is dropping war crimes charges against 4 SEALs accused of assault in Afghanistan in 2012. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh says this comes at a time when Navy justice is under a microscope. So, Steve, this involves prisoners taken into custody back in 2012. What were these 4 SEALs accused of doing in Afghanistan?
So, yes, prosecutors accusing them of abusing detainees at their base north of Kandahar in southern Afghanistan. This was way back in May of 2012. The allegations include firing at a prisoner's head, dropping a rock on their chest, and then forcing someone down with their boot, then covering this up. Now, this was way back in 2012. They were actually given a punishment by their commander, which avoided a court-martial. Then this all came up again in 2015 after a New York Times story detailed allegations of abuse. This case has still been hanging around for a couple of years, but their court-martial was scheduled to start, at least for 3 of them, on August 19th.
So, Steve, the Navy is dropping all charges of detainee abuse against the SEALs. Are these the war crime allegations?
So, yes, so Rear Admiral Betty Bolivar made the announcement last night that all those charges would be dropped against Chief David Schwartz and Xavier Silva, Special Warfare Operator Daniel Ambrosio, as well as their commander, Lieutenant Jason Webb. Now, the head of Navy Region Southwest says that prosecutors told her that the evidence from 2012 had been degraded. We've been told that includes eyewitness testimony. Keep in mind that this happened now 7 years ago.
And this has really been an interesting time for Navy Justice. SEAL Eddie Gallagher was acquitted of most of the charges against him. Other charges against SEALs have been dropped. What's going on here?
So let's count it up. When this summer began, there were 6 SEALs on trial for war crimes, or scheduled to be on trial for war crimes in San Diego alone. One of those, Chief Eddie Gallagher, only received 1 count, and that was the minimum charge that he faced. And then 5 other SEALs have now had those charges dropped. We've also been told that the original prosecutor in the case, in the Gallagher case, has now been reassigned to Washington, so there's now a new prosecutor in San Diego, and that the head of the Navy, Admiral John Richardson, has given the Vice CNO 60 days to complete a forces-wide review of the Judge Advocate General's office. And we've seen documents that show that he wants them to look at the last 4 years of the actions of the Judge Advocate General's office nationwide. Now, but clearly there are other problems going on with the SEALs. We remember that recently a team from SEAL Team 7 was sent home from Iraq. Other SEALs are still on trial on the East Coast for war crimes. And so those problems clearly don't stop with military justice.
There's definitely a lot going on there. That's military reporter Steve Walsh bringing us the latest. Steve, thanks so much for that reporting.
Thanks, Priya.
San Diego County confirms its first case of measles this year. Local health officials found the infection in an 11-month-old child who recently traveled to the Philippines. The infant has been hospitalized. However, officials are concerned the child might have exposed others while at 2 Kaiser Permanente medical facilities between July 29th and August 5th. Symptoms of measles include a distinctive rash, fever, cough, runny nose, and red eyes. Check our website, kpbs.org, for updates on the story. 2 county supervisors are calling on San Diego to clean up its act when it comes to our air. Today, Nathan Fletcher and Greg Cox launched a new Clean Air for All campaign. Here's KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman.
Barrio Logan, National City, San Ysidro are severely impacted by air quality issues.
Trucks are constantly rumbling through San Diego County's South Bay, often heading to the ports.
The terminal facilities generated a lot of air pollution because of the heavy equipment.
Some port tenants have already started investing in electric and lower emission vehicles. But county officials say more needs to be done.
When you look at the simple reality that a child in Barrio Logan is 8 times more likely to have asthma than a child in La Jolla, I believe that is morally wrong.
County staff is allocating $28 million of state funds to businesses, government agencies, and nonprofits so that they can swap out polluting machinery for electric and low-carbon options.
This is an example of a higher emission vehicle. The county's hoping this money will help get trucks like this off the road and replace them with lower emission vehicles.
$28 million alone is not going to do it, but it is a positive step in the right direction.
The county says the money will first go to areas that need it the most, like Sherman Heights, Barrio Logan, and Portside areas.
Communities that have the dirtiest air, communities that historically have been disadvantaged and left behind.
And the money isn't just for vehicles.
Trucking, freight equipment, off-road equipment, equipment rental companies, agricultural companies, marine and repair businesses, locomotive, K through 12 schools.
The county is accepting proposals now and will make final decisions by the fall. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
San Diego's investor-owned utility is showing off firefighting vehicles that'll be in the region this fall. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson says the weather is warming up and the fire risk is rising. He was on hand to see some of the firefighting tools San Diego Gas and Electric is making available.
This is really the key for this air crane. These are the pipes that it uses to drop into a reservoir. It can pick up 2,600 gallons of water, do it in less than a minute, and be off to firefighting. This craft has been in San Diego County for a decade, and it's been used more than 170 times. Over here, this is the new helicopter that the county is going to be using. It's a Black Hawk helicopter, picks up 850 gallons at a time. The real advantage of this vehicle is that it can go quick. It can fly 140 miles an hour, so it can get to a small fire before it gets big and dump water on it. And then the third asset that the SDGE is talking about today is this vehicle over here, which is basically a command and control center. It allows you to get maps or real-time video feeds from remote locations, and it can serve as a control center that's out in the area where a wildfire is burning.
That's KPBS reporter Eric Anderson. It's no secret fire season is year-round in San Diego. CAL FIRE has already responded to more than 160 vegetation fires in San Diego County so far. But the weather for the next couple days should work in our favor. Meteorologist Justin Povic has our forecast.
Now, once again, we saw some clouds earlier on today, moisture working its way from south to north. Overall, over the course of the next couple of days, we will see the troughiness slide its way eastbound, and this will push the onshore flow. Again, further inland, that means low clouds will be a little bit more common, and temperatures will moderate as we've entered the weekend, as the low cloudiness has a tendency to begin to back off. But again, there you can see the moisture again streaming up from south to north. So again, over some of the mountainous locations, again, spotty showers still going to be a possibility here, at least into the short term. But this is going to be well east of the metro. Here for tonight, we're talking about partly cloudy conditions, low temperatures dropping down into the mid-60s. And throughout San Diego County, you get a look for the late night low clouds to again work their way back into the picture around Oceanside. Borrego Springs drops down to 80. It's been a sizzler here, again, out east over the course of the past couple of days. Of course, we talked about Palm Springs and setting a record high temperature a couple of days ago. Thermal's been very hot. Borrego Springs, you've been in the 1-teens, so your numbers will start to back off just a bit. Notice only isolated thunderstorms now as we venture into Thursday, so the monsoonal flow is beginning to back off here just a little bit. Slight chance for some showers and thunderstorms throughout portions of the Sierra Nevada. This is going to be well north of our area. All right, let's check out conditions here as we venture into tomorrow morning. Clouds, low clouds and fog. Again, with the increasing onshore flows, that troughiness works its way off to the east. Again, some of the inland valleys, at least the western valleys, will have a tendency to have some low clouds first thing. Late day sunshine, San Diego 74, Borrego Springs up to 108. So there's still the warmth there, but it's not as excessively hot as it has been. And still notice as we've entered the weekend, troughiness still around, but it is a little further off toward the north. So we'll have a tendency to, again, be seeing a little bit more sunshine, at least throughout the midday hours, as opposed to the next couple of days with more low clouds and fog. Here's the coastal temperatures next couple of days into the 70s. A little change inland, but you'll notice throughout the deserts here a little cooler as we venture our way throughout the next couple of days. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Povic. Back to you in the studio.
Depending on where you live, using an electric fan to beat the summer heat might not be such a great idea. A group of scientists in Australia looked at how fans affected the human body both in dry and humid conditions. They found that fans don't really cool people down in hot, dry weather. Researchers say fans speed up how fast sweat evaporates from your skin, making it harder for your body to fight the heat. If you're in humid areas, though, you're in luck. Sweat doesn't evaporate as easily in humid air and can make using a fan more effective. A new study from UC San Diego is out showing that nurse suicides is much higher than the general population. So what's contributing to these numbers and what can be done to stop it? Joining me to help discuss this is Dr. Judy Davidson, one of the co-authors of this study. Dr. Davidson, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So tell me about these numbers. The study says in 2014, which I believe was the most recent numbers that we have about this, suicide rates were 58% higher for female nurses and 41% higher for male nurses than the general population. Why do you think that is?
The reasons for the suicide rate are not clearly understood at this time. This is the first study that's been done on nurse suicide in the United States in over 2 decades. So we're just beginning to investigate this and learn more about it. We do have a suicide prevention program at UCSD, and through that program over the last 3 years, we've learned that nurses are under a lot of stress related to either over-regulation. The profession is highly regulated. There's a lot of rules, and that creates a lot of psychological burden. Then, of course, witnessing things like death, repeated death of people that remind you of your loved ones or family members. So, for instance, if you were taking care of a baby that was burned and died, and that baby was the same age as your own at home, it might really affect you deeply.
Yeah, it's definitely an inherently stressful profession. And I did read a little bit that it's also a little bit about the culture, that when you look at fields like law enforcement or emergency responders, oftentimes when they witness death, they get time off, whereas that's not really the case when it comes to nursing, right?
Right. A nurse can work with a patient and develop a really deep connection with that patient, and the patient may not survive. And then as soon as that patient's gone to the morgue, she's expected to pick up the next one right in queue. So there's no break at all between these big events and then the next person they need to care for.
And so you mentioned the UC San Diego program, the HERE program. Tell me a little bit about that. I know it started in 2009 and it's aimed to help prevent these high suicide rates.
Yes, that was developed by our physicians in collaboration with the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention in 2009, after they realized that they were having frequent repeated suicides amongst the medical staff. And that's not unique to UCSD. That's common throughout the country. It's known that doctors are at a higher risk. So they decided to take a proactive approach and encourage physicians to take a screening profile, anonymous encrypted screening, at least once a year. And through that screening profile, they can find high-risk individuals and encourage them to get the mental health treatment they need. So they can remain completely anonymous all the way through the referral process. And we think that's why this works.
Right, so tell me about that. It seems like the suicide rates have gone down since the program started.
Yeah. We can't get false hopes that this will never happen again, but it has, the physicians they used to have one per year at UCSD, between like medical student all the way up to attending, and there have been no physician deaths since they started the program. We had nurse suicides in San Diego several years back. We started that program, and for the nurses, extended it to them, and we have not had a suicide since. We know that we can't prevent them completely. Suicide will happen at some point, but we are detecting many high-risk individuals and getting them into treatment.
Well, I know a lot of other medical centers around the country are trying to replicate this program now, so it seems like you're doing really incredible work. Dr. Davidson, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump is met with protests while visiting El Paso and Dayton to console victims of the weekend's mass shootings. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
San Diego International Airport is named the best airport in the United States. That's according to a new study by the travel website The Point Sky. It looked at the 50 busiest airports in the U.S., ranking them from best to worst based on things like commute times, food options, and flight cancellations. Phoenix's Sky Harbor, Portland, Hartsfield, Jackson, and Atlanta, and Sacramento airports rounded out the top 5. Many of us spend hours a day on our computers and smartphones, but it may be time to pay more attention to just how much screen time we're exposed to. Mandy Gaither has more on how to protect yourself from blue light in tonight's Health Minute.
The blue light that comes from your cell phone also comes at a price.
Any exposure to any blue light has been proven to suppress melatonin release by the brain.
And because of that, it throws off our body's sleep cycle. So doctors recommend staying off your phone before heading to bed.
Anything we can do to try to reduce this harmful high-energy blue light, let natural melatonin be released, is going to lead to better functioning of individuals.
Research shows that exposure to blue light may even lead to a higher risk of cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. And too much exposure can cause damage to your eyes over time.
Blue light and this whole generation and era of high digital device use is just blossoming. And we're just worried there's going to be consequences down the road.
So for now, experts recommend using tools and technology like blue light blocking glasses to protect your eyes. Also, try to balance your time in front of screens. You can also adjust the screens to night mode, which emits warmer light, is easier on your eyes, and more beneficial to your sleep cycle. For today's Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
Today is National Purple Heart Day. It's America's oldest decoration for military merit. It was created by General George Washington in 1782. The Purple Heart bears his image and the Washington family crest. 6 soldiers earned the Purple Heart during the Revolutionary War. Before World War II, the honor was presented to soldiers for, quote, any singularly meritorious action. But since 1944, the requirements limited the award to only those wounded or killed in combat. There's no full record, but it's estimated nearly 2 million Purple Hearts have been awarded. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening.